Windows users are abandoning Microsoft for Linux in numbers nobody saw coming. And Bill Gates knows exactly why it's happening. December 2025. You turn on your PC to work. Before you can open a single file, Windows 11 hits you with 3 ads, a Copilot pop-up you never asked for, and a notification demanding you link your Microsoft account. Again, this is the experience driving millions away from Windows, not to Apple's expensive hardware, to free software, to Linux. The numbers tell a story Microsoft doesn't want you to see. Windows market share dropped from 90% to 72% in the last decade. That's 18 percentage points of users gone. Meanwhile, Linux desktop adoption jumped from 3% to nearly 5% globally. In the US, it's even higher at 5.4%. Those percentages sound small until you realize they represent tens of millions of computers. But here's what makes this different from every other year of Linux desktop hype. This time, the migration is real, it's measurable, and it's accelerating. Windows 10 reaches end of life in October 2025. Microsoft is forcing users to upgrade to Windows 11 or buy new hardware. Millions are choosing option 3. Leave Windows entirely. The frustration isn't theoretical. Windows Central called 2025 an awful year for Windows 11. Infuriating bugs, constant unwanted features. The continuous innovation strategy Microsoft loves became the reason users hate their operating system. You paid for Windows. You own the hardware. But Microsoft treats your computer like their advertising platform.
I know you paid $100. I'm still gonna put ads in here.
Microsoft is employing full-screen ads.
Implement a feature known as Recall, which periodically takes screenshots of your computer.
End of free security updates for Windows 10.
Don't even get me started on the Windows taskbar.
Why do you need to install updates? What updates? Some more f***ing spyware? It doesn't even give you a choice to say no.
If you care about tech that works for people instead of treating them like products, subscribe and hit the bell. We're exposing what big tech doesn't want discussed. The breaking point came from everywhere at once. Start menu filled with recommended apps you never installed. File Explorer pushing OneDrive cloud storage. Taskbar that resets your preferences every restart. Recall feature taking screenshots of everything you do. These aren't bugs. This is Windows 11 working exactly as Microsoft designed it.
Too many pop-ups. Windows 11 just seems like Microsoft took Windows 10 and said, how do we make this more annoying? The start menu? Full of ads. Settings? Got ads in there too. File Explorer now has a recommended section that tries to sell you on cloud storage.
Gaming was supposed to keep users locked to Windows forever. That's breaking too. Steam Deck changed everything. Valve shipped millions of handheld gaming PCs running Linux. Not Windows. Linux. Gamers bought them expecting compatibility issues. Instead, they discovered their entire Steam libraries work on Linux. Perfectly. Sometimes better than on Windows. The data is undeniable. Linux gaming on Steam was 1.4% in January 2023. By December 2025, it hit 3.6%. That's a 150% increase in 2 years. Over 13 million Steam users now game on Linux. Not because they're Linux enthusiasts, because Windows 11 gave them a reason to try something else. Performance matters to gamers. One benchmark went viral. Same PC, same game. Counter-Strike 2 ran at 340 frames per second on Pop! OS Linux, 285 frames per second on Windows 11. That's 19% better performance just from switching operating systems. When gamers see numbers like that, they start asking questions. Why is my expensive hardware running slower on Windows? The answer is bloatware. Background processes, telemetry constantly sending data to Microsoft, services you can't disable. Windows 11 uses 40% more RAM at idle than Ubuntu Linux. 40%. That's memory your applications could use. Instead, it's feeding Microsoft's data collection. But gaming is just one catalyst. The bigger shift is happening in workplaces. Corporate IT departments are testing Linux deployments at scales that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Schleswig-Holstein, Germany made the announcement in April 2024. 30,000 government computers migrating from Windows to Linux. The entire state. Not a pilot program. Full deployment. They're not doing this because they love open source philosophy. They're doing it because Windows 11 became unmanageable. Too expensive. Too intrusive. Too unreliable. Munich tried this before. Migrated to Linux in 2006. Switched back to Windows in 2017 after Microsoft lobbying and political pressure. They regretted it immediately. Windows 10 was worse for city operations. Windows 11 was intolerable. The migration back to Linux is being discussed again. Not because Linux is perfect, because Windows became impossible. Barcelona, Paris, Rome, Amsterdam. European cities are independently reaching identical conclusions. Linux costs less air, performs better, and doesn't treat government computers like data collection terminals. When cities responsible for millions of residents are willing to migrate entire IT infrastructures away from Windows, that's not ideology. That's desperation. The cost calculation is brutal for Microsoft. One company compared their spending. Microsoft 365 subscriptions for 3,000 employees cost $450,000 annually. LibreOffice is free. Even accounting for training and transition costs, they saved $1.2 million over 3 years. Corporate finance teams see those numbers and ask their IT departments one question: why are we still paying Microsoft?
And it's crazy. The PC that I built keeps saying, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. You got to sign into your Microsoft account to do that. And what really pushes me over the edge, this really small fucking thing that really pisses me off, is sometimes when I turn my PC on, my taskbar's there. Now, on most of your PCs, that might be normal. However, I have mine to automatically hide because I have an OLED monitor, meaning if the taskbar is sitting at the bottom of my screen 24/7, it'll just burn into my screen because OLED. But when I turn on my PC or restart it, Microsoft, it just deactivates it. It's there, and I have to go into the settings, turn it back off. Why? In my opinion, Windows 10 was the last good.
Here's what Microsoft can't compete with: community support. When you have a Windows problem, you call Microsoft support. Wait hours. Get unhelpful responses. When you have a Linux problem, like you post on Reddit's Linux for Noobs forum, 380,000 members. Detailed answers within minutes. From people who actually want to help you understand your computer instead of just telling you to restart it. YouTube destroyed the final barrier. 5 years ago, switching to Linux required technical knowledge, command line expertise, troubleshooting skills. Not anymore. Complete migration guides have millions of views. Step-by-step walkthroughs. Which distribution to choose. How to install. How to set up your applications. It's accessible to anyone willing to spend 20 minutes watching a tutorial. If you think users deserve better than being treated like products, hit that like button. This story goes deeper than anyone realizes. The distributions themselves evolved into actual Windows alternatives. Ubuntu installation takes 20 minutes. Everything works out of the box. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, printers, graphics, no driver hunting, no bloatware. No Copilot interrupting your workflow. Just a desktop that does what you tell it to do. Pop! OS from System 76 designed their interface specifically for users switching from Windows. Taskbar at the bottom. Application menu. File manager. It looks familiar because it's meant to. Users switching from Windows feel comfortable immediately. Linux Mint takes it further. Looks exactly like Windows 7 deliberately. For users who loved Windows 7 and hate everything after, Mint gives them that interface back. Updated, secure, without Microsoft's control.
More and more PC builders are now using Linux instead of Windows. And for you super nerds, this data is actually really fun to look at. This is the desktop operating system market share worldwide chart, and the red indicates Linux steadily increasing. Compare that to the blue Windows line, and in the last decade, they went from 90% down to 72%. It's pretty wild seeing that many people move away from Windows. Now, the Steam Deck has definitely contributed to this because they've sold millions of them at this point. PC gamers and normal users are also just getting sick of all the bloatware and nonsense that comes with a Windows machine. If you've ever tried a Linux distro before, such as Pop! OS, Ubuntu Desktop, or even Mint, then you'll quickly realize how less annoying those operating systems are compared to Windows. If you have some spare time, I'd highly recommend throwing in a spare SSD into your build and dual booting a Linux distro to play around with it. I think Pop! OS is a great starting point for rookies, but you can't go wrong with Ubuntu Desktop as well.
Application compatibility was the last barrier. That's crumbling. Gmail, Google Docs, Slack, Zoom, Salesforce. Most business applications are web-based now. Run identically on any operating system. For desktop applications, alternatives matured. LibreOffice handles Microsoft Office formats well enough for most users. DaVinci Resolve runs natively on Linux for video editing. Blender for 3D work. GIMP for image editing. The creative tools exist without Adobe's subscription fees. For the few Windows-only applications that remain, compatibility layers improved dramatically. Wine runs many Windows applications directly on Linux. For stubborn software, virtual machines work. Install Windows 10 in VirtualBox. Run the one application that absolutely requires Windows. Use Linux for everything else. Users are finding they can migrate while maintaining access to critical software. Here's what this means for Bill Gates and Microsoft. Linux reaching 5% market share matters. At 6%, which analyst projections show happening by late 2026, software developers must support Linux. Can't ignore 1 in 17 desktop users. Hardware manufacturers optimize for Linux. The tipping point approaches where Linux becomes mainstream default instead of alternative. Microsoft has no response to free software backed by community support. Can't compete with operating systems that respect user control. Can't force people to stay when better options exist. Windows 11 gave users reasons to explore alternatives. Linux gave them reasons to stay. Once users switch and discover Linux is faster, more stable, and more respectful of their choices, they don't come back. The migration is accelerating, not because Linux marketing convinced anyone, because Windows 11 broke the fundamental promise of personal computing. You buy hardware, you install software, it should work for you, not collect data on you, not show you ads, not force updates you don't want, not require accounts you never asked for. That promise still exists on Linux, and millions of users are discovering it every month. Drop a comment with your Windows 11 experience. Are you considering the switch? Subscribe for more honest tech analysis that big tech doesn't want you hearing. Because this story isn't over. The Linux migration is just beginning, and Microsoft knows it.